In late 2025 and early 2026, the United States launched massive, coordinated military strikes. B-2 stealth bombers targeted Iran's top leadership and its deeply buried nuclear facilities, aiming to dismantle the nation's command structure in a single operation. The U.S. poured billions of dollars into this assault, yet Iran absorbed the barrage by retreating into vast underground fortresses. These complexes, carved directly into the Zagros Mountains, act as natural, impenetrable shields against American bunker busters. Instead of matching American firepower dollar for dollar, Iran shifted the math. They deployed swarms of cheap, mass-produced kamikaze drones. At just $2,000 apiece, these simple aircraft are designed to blind and destroy $300 million American radar systems. This strategy leaves a superpower with total conventional supremacy bleeding resources. The United States is currently stuck in a slow, grueling war of attrition that overwhelming firepower alone cannot win. Iran expanded the conflict to the global supply chain, specifically targeting commercial vessels in the narrow waters of the Strait of Hormuz. By threatening these ships, they effectively hold 20% of the global oil supply hostage. They then pointed those same cheap drones at neighboring Gulf states. A single strike on these exposed coastal desalination plants could instantly cut off 60% of the drinking water for millions of people in the region. Deeper underwater, the threat extends to the thick network of submarine internet cables laid across the ocean floor. Severing these lines halts the global data and banking traffic that sustains the modern economy. The United States is risking a global energy crisis and a total internet blackout to fight a regional war 7,000 miles from its shores. To understand why the stakes are this high, we have to look at what exactly the U.S. military is protecting. In August 1971, the U.S. dollar faced a crisis of trust. President Richard Nixon announced the dollar would no longer be backed by gold, leaving foreign nations wondering why they should hold American currency. Looking for a new anchor, the U.S. approached Saudi Arabia in 1974. They struck a deal. The American military provided absolute protection for the Gulf's royal families in exchange for oil being sold exclusively in U.S. dollars. Because oil is a universal necessity, every nation is forced to buy dollars first to acquire energy. This system locks in permanent global demand for U.S. currency and cements America's economic dominance. The American military presence in the Middle East functions as the physical, heavily armed bodyguard for the entire petrodollar system. Iran has historically rejected this economic architecture. In 1951, Prime Minister Mossadegh nationalized Iranian oil, declaring that profits from the oil fields should go to the Iranian people, not Western corporations. To protect Western profits, the CIA and British intelligence orchestrated a coup in 1953. They ousted the elected prime minister and installed the Shah, a compliant monarch who kept the oil flowing westward for decades. The resentment from that interference eventually triggered the 1979 Islamic Revolution. The Shah was expelled, and the new regime was intensely anti-American, famously culminating in the seizure of 52 American hostages. Decades later, Iran watched as the U.S. military ousted Saddam Hussein after he attempted to sell Iraqi oil in euros. They saw that nations without a way to push back against American intervention were eventually dismantled. Tehran concluded that diplomacy was a trap. To survive, they began building a system of leverage designed to make any outside intervention prohibitively expensive. This style represents the first pillar, nuclear ambiguity. By enriching uranium to 60%, well beyond civilian needs, Iran remains just days away from a weapon, using that threshold as a permanent deterrent. The second pillar is the axis of resistance. Iran funds and equips proxy militias across Yemen, Lebanon, and Palestine, ensuring that any conflict with the U.S. is fought outside of Iran's own borders. The third pillar is geographic weaponization. By positioning themselves at the Strait of Hormuz, Iran can sever the transit route for 20% of all global oil with just a handful of cheap mines or drones. These three pillars are combined to ensure that the economic cost of destroying Iran is far higher than the United States can afford to pay. In the current conflict, Iran has issued a brutal ultimatum to the Gulf states. If they allow the U.S. to launch attacks from their bases, Iran will systematically destroy the desalination plants and shipping routes that provide their food and water. This creates a paradox. The U.S. must protect the Gulf to maintain the petrodollar system, yet the physical presence of the U.S. military is the exact trigger putting the Gulf in Iran's crosshairs. The Gulf nations now face a choice. They could expel the American military to save their infrastructure, but doing so would evaporate the foundational security guarantee that keeps the global petrodollar system alive. The American military is built to defeat nation-states in direct combat, but right now it is trapped in a geopolitical and economic puzzle that it cannot bomb its way out of.